think of Alvin Plantinga's example of McEar. McEar his nature is just to lift his arm and to pick at his ear. But he could do that, everything that's consistent with his nature, and that's consistent with the laws of logic. He's not breaking any laws of logic when he's scratching his ear, right? So
exactly. Everything you and I do in our lives is logically consistent, or at least logically possible, and within our nature. So we can define ourselves as omnipotent by the definition, which is why, as I said, no philosopher or theologian uses the definition, despite George saying otherwise.
Okay.
Again, the same error of truncating the definition, and it never ceases to amaze me, the intellectual dishonesty of them not dealing with the issue. God's omnipotence is nearly universally held by biblical theologians, is that he can bring about any state of affairs that he so desires or chooses, and that comports with his nature. I cannot be omnipotent because there are states of affairs that I might choose to do. Like, for example, right now, I desire that a pile of $1 million be right at my feet. I cannot bring that to pass. So I'm not omnipotent under that definition. But so for the third time, the trolls in the room truncate the definition of omnipotence to simply be that omnipotence is just what is consistent with one's nature. That's not the definition, and it's intellectually dishonest to represent it that way. But I'm not surprised. This is what trolls do.
Okay, and here's what my answer would be, is I just don't see the big deal about throwing out all of these labels, omniscient, omnipresent, like, so what? Let's throw out the labels.
The reason was that is with the example of the this is really quick to address specifically what Darwin's the issue is that it's the case that the creature McEar, he only chooses to lift his arm and scratch his ear, so he's also staying consistent with doing anything that he chooses to do. So that covers that slight like a modification that Darwin has done, and it makes it the case that some weird thing called a McEar is omnipotent. If some human only chooses to do human things and things that are within his, within the lines of his nature, then that person is omnipotent. Nothing has really changed, though. Nothing. He needs a better definition of omnipotence. It's back to the drawing board.
This is
okay. Well, I was going to respond after
For
Joe.
example, parting the Red Sea would be an example of omnipotence. Okay.
Well, I mean, like a cool sorcerer could do that.
Okay. No, we're not talking about a cool sorcerer. What we're talking about is that What we're talking about is that the Christian God can bring to pass any state of affairs that he desires. Okay, and this analogy of lifting your arm to scratch your ear is just it's an absurdity. It's an attempt to water down the nature of God's omnipotence. There's no analogy here. The fact of the matter is this: the Bible teaches and defines and describes God as being omnipotent, meaning that he can bring about any state of affairs that he desires to do. Okay? Now, he might not desire to do that, but were he to so decide to do so, he can do so, with the caveat that as long as it doesn't contradict his immutable nature, because omnipotence does not entail no limitations. So this is just a childish attempt to compare the omnipotence of God to some creature scratching his ear. I would expect better arguments than an infantile reasoning like that.
Jake, can I respond to that? Because he's saying that Alvin Plantinga's argument against these types of omnipotence definitions is just a childish attempt from someone like, I guess, feeble, dishonest, and immature. I guess he's going to have to, become more familiar with the top theistic philosophers that I think
that is quite funny.
Yeah.
D is Swinburne's preferred understanding of omnipotence in the first edition. In the revised edition, he again defends D against counterexamples, but finally rejects it in favor of a definition with an important further qualification. Roughly, the omnipotent being is not required to be able to bring about states of affairs that are believed to be irrational or wrong. More recently, however, Swinburne has rejected that qualification and gone back to D, but D modified to take account of the problem of McEar. So, we're at the problem of McEar. Definitions in the style of D5 and D, promising as they may seem, face a well-known problem. As Swinburne notes, D may, however, need to be tightened up in order to take account of the problem of McEar, a hypothetical creature dreamed up by Plantinga, but with medieval precursors, for the purpose of raising a difficulty for such definitions of omnipotence. McEar is a creature limited in its powers as a matter of necessity. There is nothing this sort of being could possibly do other than scratching its ear. And as I shall interpret the proposed counterexample in the same way that Edward Wieringa does, I'll take this to mean that the being can also perform other bodily motions by means of which it scratches its ear, but nothing more. So long as McEar can scratch, it counts as omnipotent by D5. Since no other states of affairs could possibly be brought about by McEar, none of these other states of affairs are relevant to determining whether McEar satisfies D5. And yet it is a pathetically weak being, as Al reminds us, so there must be something wrong with the definition. I'm assuming that D's, in Richard's D, that the use of entailment there to identify and set aside impossible states of affairs has the same effect as D5's use of impossibility, so that if McEar satisfies D5, he satisfies D as well. However silly the example might seem, there is a valid point behind it. For there is nothing silly about the idea that the powers of a particular kind of thing might be limited in certain ways and limited as a matter of necessity. Electrons have the power to attract protons and to repel other electrons. Would it be possible for a particular electron suddenly to gain the power to attract other electrons and repel protons? It's tempting to say no. It is of the essence of an electron not to do such things. So even if the wacky McEar is not a possible creature, and Edward Wieringa argues that McEar isn't, there may nevertheless be essential limits to the powers of some beings. And if so, why not to those of intelligent beings like us? In that case, an essentially weak creature might always be, at the height of its puny powers, able to do the full repertoire of things that such a being could possibly do, and thereby qualify as omnipotent on these definitions, even though the range of things it can do is very limited.
This is just a childish attempt to compare the omnipotence of God to some creature scratching his ear. I would expect better arguments than an infantile reasoning like that.